Hello, I'm Hope Pouts. As part of my graduate work in educational technology at Wilson College, I've completed my first action research. My action research focuses on the impact student response systems have on students' academic achievement and students' perception of this approach at the elementary school level. Throughout this presentation, a student response system, or SRS, is defined as a tool which focuses on providing an interface for answering questions, allowing an instructor to obtain real-time feedback during lectures. Currently, there is very little research on the impact student response systems have on elementary level students. However, there's a vast array of research regarding the impact of student response systems on secondary and collegiate level students. Due to the lack of research, I felt it was necessary to begin exploring this area of study. As a third grade elementary school teacher, I know the rigor and expectations for students are at an optimal high. Third grade is the year students begin taking state standardized assessments, the PSSAs. Student success has become so highly valued that schools are being penalized if a district does not display academic growth. Being a teacher, I feel I'm at the forefront of this battle, but the question remains: how do I present and engage information to students in a way to grow them academically and still keep them engaged? This pathway of thinking led me to another reason this study is so pertinent. Technology has become an almost intrinsic need to stimulate students. Technology has a draw for many areas of learning, and student response systems can be used to capture this generation of technology-saturated students. For a moment, I want you to think of a classroom. A teacher asks a question. It might be a rather difficult question. Do you picture all of the students raising their hands wanting to answer? Or do you picture the frequent hand raisers being the only ones raising their hands engaging in this part of the lesson? After asking this question to my team of 7 other third grade teachers, they all reported that only the frequent hand raisers would be apt to raise their hand. However, if a student response system was present, all students would be required to engage in the question, creating an environment where all students are present and interacting with the content instead of the systematic hand raisers. As I continued to think about the need for this study, my colleagues asked many questions that I did not yet have the answer to. So I decided that this study needs to happen so I can inform teachers on the impact students' response systems have on students' academic achievements, while also gaining a greater understanding of students' perceptions of this approach. This study is also needed to gain a greater understanding of the impact an SRS, or student response system, has on students' academic achievement compared to their achievement when an SRS is not present. The study at hand focused on a mixed methods approach. The quantitative approach was used to see if there were improvements on students' quiz scores due to the influence of a student response system. The qualitative approach was used to report students' perceptions of an SRS. After diving into research and using some of my background knowledge of an SRS, I hypothesized that students' quiz scores will positively improve as a result of engaging in an SRS. I also hypothesized that using an SRS is positively related to students' focus, participation, and motivation to learn. For the purpose of my study, my subjects were drawn from a convenient sample of 37 third grade students. These students were all between 8 and 9 years old. The setting of the study took place at my intermediate school in central Pennsylvania. The study utilized a mixed methods research design in order to gain a broader perspective of students' perceptions and achievements pre- and post-Kahoot. The independent variable in the study was, as I mentioned, Kahoot. The dependent variables were the students' achievements on vocabulary quizzes and students' perception of using the SRS Kahoot. In order to control these variables, I presented with consistency the instructional material and quizzes and administered the survey and interview questions in the same manner. The collection of data was split into 2 6-week cycles. The instructional process I went through to collect the quantitative data during Cycle 1 and Cycle 2 was identical. First, students were introduced to 10 new vocabulary words each unit. These words were presented through a PowerPoint. As I presented the new words, students wrote their new words on the definitions page of their individual vocabulary workbooks, and I read the sentence in their vocabulary books to accompany the new words. After the initial presentation of words, students worked on their new vocabulary words for an additional 4 days by completing the activities in their vocabulary workshop books. For each unit, these activities included match the meaning, synonyms and antonyms, completing the sentence, and word associations. After the completion of these activities, students took a quiz on their vocabulary words. Students' quiz scores during Cycle 1 were recorded, and a mean score for Class Number 1 and Class Number 2 was calculated. As stated in the previous slide, Cycle 2 was an exact replica of Cycle Number 1, with the exception of the independent variable Kahoot. During Cycle 2, students completed one game of Kahoot the day prior to their vocabulary quiz. During Kahoot, all students participated in the activity. As students engaged in the Kahoot lesson, I was able to clear up misconceptions during the game, and students were also able to engage in the conversation, making the learning process a collaborative effort. Here are a few snapshots of Kahoot taking place in my classroom during the second cycle of my research. My cats blank themselves when they run around the house.
No, one's black. Exercising. I don't know which one is.
Oh, we almost all got it right. But we have some people who clicked in decay. Decay was a vocabulary word we once had. Will anybody explain to the class what does the word decay mean and why does it not fit there and why does exhaust fit there? Whoever's speaking, make sure all your eyes go on them.
Decay means to rot, and the cats don't rot themselves if they run around. That would just be horrible.
Why would the answer be exhaust? Can anyone clear that up for everyone?
Oh. Because it means like they're tiring themselves out.
They're tiring themselves out. What context clues could help you figure out that it's going to be exhaust? How do you know? Lila?
Because when they run around, they exhaust themselves, and
Yeah.
it makes them like really tired.
It makes them really tired. Synonyms: attachment, commitment, dedication, faith, and allegiance. Which one of these words is a synonym? Can anyone tell us? This one was a little bit more challenging. So let's try to, if we have a gap in our knowledge here, let's try to close that up. Why was it devotion? Can anyone tell us? How do you know the synonym was devotion to these other words?
Well, none of the other words were one of the vocabulary words that we just
Yeah. How else do you know words?
because attachment means loyalty.
It means
And-
what?
Loyalty.
Oh, okay.
And devotion means loyalty.
Good. So you know both of them mean to be loyal to something. Do you have something else to add?
Devotion means faith. It means everything, but none of the other words don't mean it.
Okay, so all those other words don't have anything to do with being devoted to something. Because we know a commitment to something means something you do maybe every day, or you do it a lot, right? And if you're dedicated to something, yeah, you're devoted to it. Mm-hmm.
Also, it's because attachment, that would be something like clamp or something.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I was blank from my friend after our fight. We did not talk for many days. Wow, nice job, guys. Boys and girls, the answer was I was distant from my friend after our fight. Why does the word distant fit in there and not the word clever?
Distant means far from, so if you have a fight, you're not really...
Do you want me to help elaborate on that, or do you want someone else to help? You're doing a great job.
friends.
Yeah, you're not close to one another anymore, right? You're far from them. Very nice job.
At the end of Cycle 2, all students participated in a structured survey that I created on SurveyMonkey. Since I teach young students, I read each survey question to them and thoroughly explained what strongly agree, disagree, and strongly disagree meant. In this clip, qualitative data was being collected as my students answered the survey questions.
Do you strongly agree where you're like, yes, it definitely does? Do you agree where you're like, yeah, it makes it more interesting. I agree with that. Do you disagree? You're like, it doesn't really make it more interesting for me. Or do you strongly disagree? Meaning it does not make it more interesting at all. Go ahead and click in your answer.
Then click OK.
Then click OK.
I also conducted a semi-structured interview with 7 students. These students were all of varying academic levels. I wanted my students to feel comfortable during the interview process, so some of them were eating lunch as I interviewed them. I will only show a few moments of this interview because it is rather difficult to hear the students, and it took place over a 10-minute period of time.
I think it's recording this.
Yep.
Alright. Just answer how you truly feel. Okay. So, do you, this goes for any of you, prefer using Kahoot or just using traditional pencil and paper things like we do with our vocabulary words every morning? Why not? And we can all just kind of discuss getting that for hands up, I guess. Let's start, Ben. What do you prefer?
I prefer Kahoot because it's on the computer and it's a challenging way of learning.
Oh, okay. Anyone else want to add anything? Oski?
It's really fun to answer questions, and it helps you if you get the question wrong.
Oh, okay. Anyone else? Jen?
I would rather do Kahoot because it makes learning and like learning the words and how to use them more interesting.
I used a triangulation design to report the qualitative results of this study. In order to report the results, I studied the data from SurveyMonkey and transferred into readable data by placing it into themes. After analyzing these patterns and themes, I reported the results of SurveyMonkey and the semi-structured interview through a thematic narrative. The quantitative results were presented first in the form of graphs, tables, and percentages. The data displays are going to be a comparison of students' mean quiz scores pre and post Kahoot. A descriptive analysis was then used to compare the impact of students' academic achievements while utilizing the SRS Kahoot to their academic achievement prior to Kahoot. These tables outline the vocabulary workshop Sadler Connect quiz results throughout the study. These tables indicate how students' mean quiz scores changed pre and post Kahoot. The table on the left shows the quiz scores of 21 students in Class 1. The table on the right shows the quiz scores of 16 students in Class 2. Of the 21 participants in Class 1, 19 out of 21, which was 90.5% of the participants, increased their quiz scores when Kahoot was implemented. Of the 16 participants in Class 2, 11 out of 16, which was 68.8% of participants, increased their scores when Kahoot was implemented. This table outlines the mean scores for each class pre and post Kahoot. The mean score of Class 1 pre-Kahoot was 69%. After the implementation of Kahoot, the mean score of Class 1 increased to 81%. This class showed a 12% increase in their mean score when Kahoot was utilized. The mean score of Class 2 pre-Kahoot was 78%. After the implementation of Kahoot, the mean score of Class 2 increased to 81%. This class showed a 3% increase in their mean score when Kahoot was utilized. This table indicates that Kahoot positively impacted students' academic achievement. Now, before I move on, a parallel of immediate teacher feedback and Kahoot must be drawn to further examine the positive increase of mean quiz scores during Cycle 2. Immediately after each question was presented during Kahoot, I took a moment to explain the correct answer and explain the reasoning behind the correct answer. These results show that exploring answers and helping students comprehend why they were right or wrong produces students with a deeper understanding of content and aids in their retention of material. The technology of Kahoot provides students with the correct answer immediately. However, the teacher aids in student understanding of the material by providing further clarification, which could be a contributing factor for the increase in student quiz scores. According to the results of the qualitative data, almost all students seem to have a positive perception of the game Kahoot. After analyzing the data of the structured survey and semi-structured interview, I was able to divide the data into 4 themes: focus, comfort, learning, and drawbacks. The data presented in this slide pertains to student focus. The majority of students agreed that playing Kahoot aids their focus during lessons. One student remarked, "I pay better attention because it's learning in a more fun way." The data presented in this slide pertains to students' comfort level with Kahoot. The majority of students agreed that they were comfortable with the technology of Kahoot. The responses show that all students agree or strongly agree that they can easily access Kahoot. One student remarked, "It's really easy to get onto Kahoot, especially when you have it bookmarked." Another student added, "My Chromebook works great with Kahoot." Although most of the students had positive perceptions of their comfort level with Kahoot, 5 students reported that they disagreed or strongly disagreed that it is easy to answer questions using Kahoot. One student remarked, "I've had problems with it. When I'm looking at the big screen to see the question and my mouse is on my computer, sometimes it picks an answer for me and it's wrong." The data presented in this slide pertains to students' learning experiences when Kahoot was utilized. The majority of students reported that Kahoot was a valuable learning tool and extended their understanding of the topic at hand. As stated earlier, immediate teacher feedback is a highly important part of the learning process. 35 students reported that I provided them with valuable feedback during Kahoot, while one student strongly disagreed. During the semi-structured interview, one student responded, "The teacher feedback helps because you know right away if you get the answer wrong and why." Another student added, "It makes it easier if there isn't a big gap between playing Kahoot and the quiz." The data presented in this slide pertains to drawbacks. The majority of students reported that Kahoot does not waste valuable class time. However, 2 students reported that Kahoot wastes valuable class time. During the interview, I tried to gain a greater understanding of students' feelings. One student reported, "If there are a lot of people playing Kahoot, the program sometimes glitches." My interpretation of this comment leads me to believe that this could be some of the wasted time referred to in the survey. To conclude, the results of the survey partially supported my original hypothesis, which was students' test scores will positively improve as a result of actively engaging in a student response system. Both classes' mean scores increased. Class 1 score increased by 12% and Class 2 score increased by 3%. This data suggests that student response systems such as Kahoot increase students' academic achievement. Although the overall mean quiz scores increased, not all individual scores rose. In Class 1, 90.5% of students' scores rose, and in Class 2, 68.8% of students' scores rose. This data indicates that Kahoot had a positive impact on most, but not all students' academic achievements. The data also supports my other original hypothesis regarding student perceptions. The data collected shows that almost all students felt that Kahoot captured their focus, was a valuable learning tool, and students were comfortable with the technology. During the single study, some limitations were unavoidable. The first limitation was the two different classes of students. Class 1 was my homeroom group. These students are in my care for 4 hours each day. In addition, these students engaged in Kahoot and completed all quizzes in the morning hours. Class 2 is only in my care for 1.5 hours each day. They engaged in Kahoot and completed all quizzes in the afternoon hours. It is noted by many third grade teachers in my district that students appear less motivated to work and learn in the afternoon hours compared to the morning hours. This factor could have contributed to the morning class having a 12% increase in their mean score compared to the afternoon class having a 3% increase. Another limitation to the study was absenteeism. If a student was absent on the day Kahoot was played, they were not given an opportunity to play Kahoot before the quiz due to a lack of resources. The third limitation was time. This study took place over a 4-month period of time. During the study, there were many snow days and school delays. If the study spanned a longer period of time and had less interruptions, the results may paint a clearer picture on the impact Kahoot had. Future studies should accommodate the limitations I just mentioned. Future studies should also conduct similar research in other content areas besides vocabulary to see if my findings are generalizable to other subject areas as well. Since the study solely focused on Kahoot, future studies could evaluate other student response systems to see if the results are similar, or if the findings in my study are specific only to Kahoot. It is of vital importance that educators are using current research in order to include best educational practices. Based on the results of this action research, teachers should use Kahoot in their classrooms. However, Kahoot should not be used to teach content. Instead, it should be used to review content, clear up misconceptions, and extend learning. The technology of Kahoot motivates and engages students through gamification and provides students with real-time feedback. For classrooms that have access to this technology, it appears wise for them to consider implementing Kahoot into their weekly lessons. I've always felt strongly about using Kahoot with my students since they always appeared to be more engaged in lesson when Kahoot was utilized, but I didn't have the data to support my inkling. I am happy to now have the research to support my practice, and I look forward to seeing how Kahoot continues to impact my students' learning experiences. Thank you.